feel like I don't look that good tonight. I don't know why. That is so random, but I just had to say that. My appearance is just not, I don't look the best. My skin's kind of oily, so like a lot of my foundation is gone, I think. And I'm filming this at night and end of the day makeup look, you know? I apologize about that, but I guess it makes it more candid that way, I guess. I don't know. Hey guys, it's Michaela and you are watching FunsizedStyle. So for this video, I debated on whether to film this. I alluded to this topic, I guess it's kind of a topic, but this day or this event, I guess you could say, a few times, my spinal fusion experience video. But if I was going to talk about it, I knew that it was going to be its own video because I knew that it would be too long to put in another video, like combine it with another portion of my spinal fusion experience. So this segment of my spinal fusion experience is going to be talking about one specific night during my hospital stay and one specific night only. I know that sounds kind of odd, but this was, you know, when you're going through a difficult season, or maybe it's just me, there's certain times or like times during that season or specific days that just stick out to you so much and you remember every single detail. And this was one of those nights for me. I was like reflecting on my recovery and how far I've come, but also the reality, and it just kind of hit me one night of like all the really hard stuff that I had to go through and had to experience to get to the point that I'm at now. A few months ago, whenever I was thinking about how grateful I was to have the outcome that I did with my spinal fusion, this night kept playing in my mind and knowing that like it was not easy to get to where I'm at today. And God really carried me through every moment of the truly miraculous outcome. But this night in specific, I will never forget, I don't think, for the rest of my life, because of how much physical pain that I felt and how emotional it was for me and how angry I was. And I've never talked about this here. Like I said, I've mentioned it, like kind of alluded to this a little bit, but never talked about it fully in detail. And what really motivated me to really sit down and talk about it is because this night I made an Instagram post, and it was like at some wild hour in the night. It was like 2 or 3 in the morning. I made this Instagram post. I'll link it here. And because I was struggling in ways that I've never struggled and suffered before. And I needed all the prayers that I could get to carry me through that night and make it to the next day. I know this sounds incredibly dramatic, but if any of my nurses are watching this video, they will remember. And I feel so bad. I'll get into that. But I made an Instagram post, and for some reason, I took a picture of myself during the most difficult moment of my life. And I remember wanting to take a picture because, well, I was making an Instagram post, and I wanted it to be like obviously real, like in the moment, so that you guys could see like what a dire situation that I was in, because like I needed help, like I needed prayers. I was in some serious physical pain. Most people wouldn't think to like take a picture of themselves in that moment, but now I'm so glad that I did, because now I look at that photo and like I see how far I've come. That's a common theme, being able to look back and see how far I've come. Like I'm so glad that I took that picture, because I can see that I was able to get through the most difficult day of my life. I can get through 100% of the hardest days of my life because of all of your prayers and the Lord on my side, literally carrying me through those incredibly deep waters. But in that moment, it felt like it was never going to end. It felt like physical pain was never going to go away, and it felt like suffering was never going to end. So that's a little bit of a background, and I know you're probably like, what are you talking about? So we'll get into it. So this was on January 7th, 2021, and we're actually backtracking a little bit because my spinal fusion revision surgery that I had, that I already did a video on, I will link it here, was on January 11th, 2021. Like I said, I'm kind of backtracking. I feel like I'm not making sense in this video, but hopefully some of you are following me. I just want to make this video to give you hope if you ever find yourself in one of these situations, which I hope you don't. As you guys know, throughout this whole entire hospital stay, pain management was a nightmare in the beginning because we discovered, again, during my surgery that the surgeon discovered that my pain receptors do not respond appropriately in my back. It's like, I forget I don't know like the general medical term for it, but apparently there's this condition where, like an actual physical condition where your body doesn't respond to pain appropriately. Pain management doesn't work. The nerves, not the nerves, but like, yeah, the nerves, I guess, don't work appropriately, regulate pain. And that there's this general condition where it happens like throughout your body, but I don't have that. Like, I've never struggled with pain management. Like whenever, during my childhood, whenever I would fracture, like we'd always just do the same regimen and it worked and it was fine. Like I obviously experienced pain, but like it was manageable. But in my back, they don't function properly. I guess it's really rare for it to only be in one specific area of the body, but I guess there are cases of it. And mine just happens to be in my spine. So that was fun because here I am going through the most difficult surgery, most painful surgery that I will ever have, and my pain receptors don't function appropriately, properly. And you can go watch that. That was in the very first segment of my spinal fusion series, so I suggest that you watch that if you want to learn more about my pain management saga. That's really important though for me to mention because that is what really made this night a night from heck. It was really weird because, like, obviously this was January 7th, 2021. My original spinal fusion was on December 23rd, 2021. During this time, I was almost like completely, pretty much off the pain. Yeah, I was off the PCA. So the PCA is like a pump where you can press a button and it administers medication, like pain medication, but it only works at certain intervals, certain amounts, and at certain times so that it doesn't overdose you. I was like completely off this. We were working more on my regular pain management rather than like the PCA because obviously it's not good to be on that long. Something else that I mentioned throughout this series is that recovery is not linear, and that included my time in the hospital. There were some days that were just, I had more pain than others, that it felt more manageable than others, and at night it always got the worst. Yes, I know there's like studies that show that pain does get worse at night. I know. It's a real thing. But anyway, it doesn't make it any easier. And it was really weird because during my spinal fusion like recovery, it always happened around the same time every night. 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock it would get really bad, and it would stay bad until like, I don't know, 3, 4 a.m. It was really weird. I'd never experienced anything like that before. This is where things get interesting. So for some reason, this night was really bad. It was out of control. Obviously, the most pain that I've ever experienced throughout my life was having the screw pierced through my head while awake when I was in heel traction. I'll link that video. That was only for 5 seconds. This was for hours on end, which made this worse because 5 seconds, it was a totally different kind of pain. So they're not even comparable. Those were the two most painful nights of my life. They were two completely different kinds of pain. I can't put it into words. It's just something that I can't articulate. So I can't compare those two because they're two very different things in very different situations. But this night it was totally out of control. Absolutely out of control. It's nobody's fault. Like I was getting when I was supposed to and on my schedule and everything. But this night it was absolutely wild. Also give you more context, it was 4 days before my spinal fusion revision surgery. Or my spinal hardware revision surgery. So I knew that I was going into surgery to have what I now knew was a loose screw. Also during this time, like, that I had started losing feeling in my legs and in my hands. I would get this really weird sensation in my leg. At night is when this would get worse as well, and again that was caused by the loose hardware, which was why I needed the revision surgery. But my spinal cord was not being impacted, so that's why it was not an emergency. During this night, the pain was really bad, and then my feeling or lack of feeling and sensation in my extremities was also really bad, which was really scary. It wasn't really something that, as the days went on, it seemed to get a little bit worse, but it wasn't something that changed a lot. Does that make sense? Like, I guess at times, like, it wasn't like in the morning is it worse, or in the afternoon, like, it stayed pretty much the same no matter the time of day, pretty much. At night it would get like a little bit worse, but this was like a lot worse than normal. This night, nothing they did got my pain under control. Absolutely nothing. I'm to the point where I'm yelling that I'm suffering. And I am still to this day so embarrassed because I'm 22 years old. Like, I should not have been crying and screaming my head off. But I'm telling you, I've never experienced pain like this night. Still, like, could never figure out what made this night so bad. But nothing they did, no amount of pain medication, like, worked, because obviously I couldn't have the PCA stuff anymore because they were working me off of that and couldn't be on that anymore. Even though 4 days later I was going back into surgery and going to be on it again, but nothing they did worked. It got to the point where I was yelling and, like, crying, screaming that I'm suffering. And I literally remember telling every single nurse that walked in that, like, when we're like ran in, especially the ones that had just came on the shift, because they can hear a patient yelling. I remember telling every single person that walked in, I just want my suffering to end. I just wanted to be medically sedated. I literally told them that. Like, I was like, if you can't find a way to, like, help me, then, like, I want to be medically sedated. I said those words, not even kidding. Looking back, like, I just can't believe that I was in that much pain that I wanted that. Like, obviously they couldn't do that, but that I wanted that. Like, I just wanted any type of medical intervention that could be done to relieve me of the suffering. As you guys know, or if you've been around for a while, you know that that is not a word that is in my vocabulary. It is not a word that I like to say. It is not a word that I use. And for me to use that word so much and so boldly gives you a picture or a glimpse into my headspace and how much I was struggling physically. And I just still to this day am embarrassed from that night because I couldn't stop. The pain was too much to bear. Like, I literally remember saying, like, this is too much to bear. Like, I can't do this anymore. I'm actually going to go ahead now and read you my Instagram post because I think that it's a good segue to what I want to talk about next, kind of going into this night from heck. Other than on my Instagram, I haven't talked about this. This was the post that I'd made. Hi friends, I am blessed to be bombarded with so many messages asking for up. What was supposed to be a 4 to 5 day stay has now turned into 14 plus. I'm sorry I haven't hardly posted or at least given more updates. So many come to my page for encouragement and positivity, but the reality of it is I'm going through the worst time of my life. I don't use the term suffer loosely, but never have I ever suffered more than I have these past. It's worse than what I experienced with H1N1 because I was medically sedated for more than half of it. Worse than any fracture I've had or surgery I've ever had. Worse than heel traction. Worse than any other trauma I've experienced. I knew this was going to be awful. I knew it was going to be brutal. I knew the pain would be off the chart. Even my surgeons in advance told me it was going to be one of the top worst surgeries one can. Even knowing that, nothing could have prepared me for this. I never complained, but tonight I am crying out and begging for my suffering to end. Pain management is a challenge right now because I have severe allergies to almost everything. I'm tired, I'm sad, I never knew it was humanly possible for one to suffer for so long. I reached my limit, and I know everyone keeps saying it will get better, and I know, but I don't know if this amount of suffering will be truly worth it. The pain and suffering I'm enduring at this moment, the pain and suffering I've endured is more than one should ever have to bear in their lifetime, let alone in just weeks. But I guess I didn't realize when I wrote this, but I should have wrote it better, but I was mainly speaking on this night because it was so bad. And here's where I say, today I reached my limit. I wish I never would have had this surgery because the suffering is just too much. I wish I would have just lived with what I had, and whatever happens with my heart and lungs would happen. I hate it, but it's already done, and there's nothing I can do about that now. It's indescribable, and no one will ever be able to understand. I just remember feeling so angry, thinking to myself, what have I done? I bring this up because in the last portion of my spinal fusion experience video of me going home, I talk about how grateful I am for this outcome. It's such a happy video, and so much, like, all of this series has been so happy and filled with joy and gratitude of this miracle. But I could not share this part of the journey because there was moments, there was that night I had wished that I never did it. I wish that I would have never had the surgery, and in that moment I remember truly just wondering, what have I done? Because in that moment, suffering didn't feel worth it. The pain didn't feel worth it. Too much for one to bear, more than one should ever have to bear. In that moment, it felt like it was never going to get better. And I thought, like, why did I put myself through something like this when we don't even know if, I guess in my thought, I thought when we don't even know if my scoliosis will get that bad. Obviously it would have, like, it's a progressive condition, but in that moment I thought, like, would it really, like, I was just angry. And I wasn't angry at anyone. I wasn't angry at my surgeons. I was angry at myself. I was angry that I let myself do this, that I let myself experience that much suffering. I remember crying out to God and, like, praying, like, God, just, like, I know you can take this. Like, I know you can take this burden from me. Literally just, like, take my pain. I know He has a power and that ability to do that. I remember, like, crying and praying out to God, like, all night long, like, God, just take, like, please take my suffering, like, take this burden. Like, I remember saying to God, like, this is too much for one to bear. He didn't that night. It didn't get better until 4 or 5 in the morning. So I went all night long like this, like, crying out hysterically, asking every single nurse that walked in to, like, help take away my suffering. Obviously, they can't tell you anything I ever told them because of HIPAA, but if they could, I know if any of them saw this video, they would confirm that that is what I said. He didn't, and I didn't understand why he didn't. I remember being, like, so upset that he didn't, but, like, I just knew that, like, He is still good. Even in my anger and frustration, like, I knew, like, He is still good, and He did. He carried me through that night. He didn't take away the suffering when I asked Him to. I got through it. I got through that night, and I will still never know why I had to endure this night, and I wish that there were words, better words that I could use to describe this night. But it truly was more physical pain than one should ever have to bear. It was horrible. It was one of the worst nights of my life. Angry that I decided to do this surgery, and I wanted so badly to go back in time and decide not to do it. But as I mentioned in the Instagram post, it was already done. Looking back as to where I am now, like, crying out for someone to medically sedate me. Like, as you guys know, like, when I had H1N1 medically sedated, reduced coma, like, that's what I wanted. Like, that's how bad I was suffering. Like, I literally was like, can you just, like, take me to the ICU and, like, they can, like, put me to sleep? Like, I literally said all of this stuff, and it's, like, crazy talk, right? But, like, that's what happens to you when you're literally just, like, fighting to stay alive. Like, it literally felt like the pain was taking over my body, and it was a feeling I've never felt in my life. And I still don't know what caused this night to spiral out of control, the pain to be so bad. Like, I will never understand. I wanted to share this because, again, I talk about how I'm so grateful for this outcome and that I decided to do the surgery. And I am. I really am. It's the best decision that I ever made, and I'll talk about that more in the end segment. I know it's an aspect that not a lot of people know, that I had major regrets that night. Obviously, I wanted to fight and going, and I got through that night, but obviously you guys know that this has not been easy, but I don't think most of you know that there was a night that I wished I never would have done it. And I'm out on the other side now from the hardest day of my life, and I can still say that I'm so glad that I did it, and I now don't have regrets. But in that moment I did. But that's why it's so important that whenever you're going through a difficult time, to literally just keep going. Because when things get better, you're going to be so glad that you did. And I'm so glad that I had the surgery. It brought me so many amazing things. It's brought me so much perspective. It's brought me so many amazing people into my life. So many amazing opportunities. This horrible night, the 22-year-old screaming and crying and begging every nurse that walked in her room to help ease her suffering. Like, they tried everything, and there was nothing that they could. And that was part of my frustration as well. And again, it was to no fault of anyone, but it was like nothing that they did was enough. And I just didn't know physical pain could, like, take over, like, someone's body and like make it feel like you can barely like stay in another second. Like I literally don't know how. Like I just kept breathing and like my body just kept pushing, and only through God's grace that I physically made it through that night. Another thing that I wanted to mention, through this horrible night when I hit absolutely rock bottom and it was the most difficult moment of my spinal fusion recovery. I mean, that was truly rock bottom. Like I could only go up from there. Several months later, when around March or April, there would just be some nights where I would just like lay in bed, and because I'll share more about this too in a segment where I was like looking over like past notes of like discussions that I had with my teams about like when we were making decisions on whether I should have the spinal fusion or not. Looking over at these notes, and like it literally says in their medical notes that they wrote like verbatim that Michaela is at great risk for ventilator dependence and after the surgery, but failure to not have the surgery could result in ventilator dependence. And just like reading through these notes, realizing how bad this situation could have gone and like how God performed this miracle for me, and I truly overcame all expectations that they had for me. And obviously they're a great team, but my body presented clinically and physically in a state that someone with these medical, in that current medical state, undergoing something like this, the likelihood were these outcomes. And to no fault of my surgeon, that's the state that my body was in going into the surgery. The fact that I came out 100 times better than like absolutely perfect, above everyone's expectations, was absolutely a miracle. And like read through the stuff and like be in awe of how big of a chapter this has been in my life. But I also, every time that I thought about it, I remembered the suffering and the hardships that I had to go through to get to this point. And yes, it was really hard, but it was worth it. And to say that I could hit rock bottom and go through the most physically difficult night of my life, and then several months later still say that it was worth it, I think is just like such a huge testament to God's faithfulness. And I wanted to share this with you because if you're undergoing a spinal fusion, just like know that there's going to be days where it's really hard, where it's really long, especially if you have really severe scoliosis like me, but I promise you that it's worth it. Again, going through these notes and like reading like verbatim like their words, these were not my summaries, like these were not my words, these were my team's words. To hear how they assumed or thought that I would come out of this and how I did, like, is absolutely amazing. But I also know the reality, not everyone has this outcome. For some people, they do succumb to scoliosis because it is so severe and they never have surgery. They're not able to have the surgery for whatever reason. This is what motivated me. This horrible, horrible night, like I kept reliving for a while. I was like, that was really, really hard. And to get to this miracle that I'm able to share with you, I had to hit rock bottom physically, come out of it and still say that it was worth it. And even though I'm so grateful, it was really hard. And it was more suffering than one could ever have to bear. And that is what sparked my interest in my mind. What can I do to make sure that no one ever has to go through that horrible night that I endured? Obviously, again, my situation is like very unique, and like 99% of people, their scoliosis is not that severe, not this severe. But for that 1% of us, like I never want to have someone go through that again. The reality is that there's people out there that will, and that's what motivated me to start this research fund that I've created at Michigan Medicine, the Michaela David OI and Scoliosis Research Fund. And through that horrible, horrible pain I experienced that night, and of course months and days following, I've been able to create something with such purpose. I want you guys to know that this journey has not been smooth sailing, and as I share in the last segment of my spinal fusion, how grateful I am in the celebratory moment, just know that something that I haven't shared with you up until now is that night I wished I'd never done it. Don't say that like I literally wished that I'd never done it. And when you're going through something and sometimes you just don't know how you're gonna get through it, and then you do, I'm just so grateful that I've been able to use this experience. I don't understand why God didn't take it that night, but He has turned it into something so, so good, and I could not be more grateful to be able to turn that pain into such a big purpose. And for that reason, I am so grateful I have endured such suffering, because without that and having that fuel inside of me of wanting no one to ever experience that night again. What motivated me to turn this pain into purpose and thinking, what could I do? And that's when I created this research fund that has and will continue to create so much change. I just want you to know that if you're going through a difficult physical recovery, just literally keep going, because if I can get through the hardest night of my life, then so can you. Just know that I'm cheering for you, and there can be so much beauty that comes from pain and so much purpose that comes from pain. And the purpose is so much bigger and better than any of the amount of pain that you'll ever endure. This was something that was really difficult for me to share because, like I said, a 22-year-old should not be like screaming and crying hysterically. She wants to be medically sedated, can't take the physical pain. I realize that not everyone has this physically miraculous outcome of a spinal fusion, and so it's hard for me to share about sometimes, but I also share this to give you hope, because I think in this world much more hope and miracles and things that God can do in our life. Thank you guys for supporting my research fund and allowing me to turn my pain into such a big purpose. And thank you guys for cheering me on through the most painful moments of my life. I will link my research fund down below, and also the Life is Worth Fighting For shirts down below. 100% of the proceeds go to Michaela Daber OI and Scoliosis Research Fund at Michigan Medicine. It is such a gift to be able to share this miracle with you, and the moments that I hit rock bottom, and share these vulnerable moments with you. And I hope that it can give you encouragement to keep going. I know life is not easy, but it's worth it, because life is worth fighting for.